I do get frustrated when there are things that do not accommodate me because of my disability, such as getting into a certain building because of stairs, or having very little room to maneuver in a certain area. But I do feel that there is a way around any problem that I face.
When I'm here with my father and my mother, God forbid, if they died, Mom and my father was died this day, I'm home alone myself. I am like this as a person like me.
Most people with disabilities are unemployed or underrepresented in the labor market, or underemployed, don't necessarily have opportunities for adequate post-secondary education and skills training to be able to be competitively employable, and therefore their abilities to overcome other barriers in their lives are quite difficult because the financial resources aren't there.
Have I experienced stereotypes? Of course. Deaf people are sometimes regarded as mentally retarded. Deaf people are sometimes regarded as communicatively inept. But remember, I'm a grad student and I'm graduating with a master's degree this May, and I still have 2 years to go before I get my specialist degree. There are deaf people with their PhDs who are doctors. Deaf does not mean anything mentally limited. My brain functions fine. It's just my ear that isn't working. I don't have hearing, but that doesn't mean I don't have language. I do have language. I have American Sign Language. But with the deaf community, it's so neat because of the interaction, and the communication is so natural and fluent. There's even a culture and everything like language, culture, tradition that makes it possible for us to bond with one another. I want this with the Muslim community as well, but it's frustrating because of the lack of interpreters available. I can't go to the masjid and there are no interpreters. What am I going to do there? Just sit around and have no idea what's going on? It's really frustrating because I want to go and be involved. It's limiting since I want to go to conferences.
I don't look at what I'm missing in terms of, the good things in the world. I look at all the ugliness that I don't see. I guess one of the number one things that the Muslim community needs to recognize is the reality that Muslims with disabilities exist, are a part of the community, have the right to fully participate within the community, and the community has an obligation to ensure that they have that right available to them.
We think we know what we see when we see people who look different or act differently. But in fact, the more you get to know many of these children and adults, the more you will realize that they can do things that the rest of us can't.
I think the dog issue actually presents an obstacle to acceptance in this country, especially because I know being in the blind community and interacting with people who have guide dogs, their view of Islam is usually negative because they have been treated poorly or have been denied services because of the fact that they have guide dogs, and they associate that with Islam, which I think is terrible for the community's image in the society, because I certainly don't think it's consistent with our teachings.
People think that these kids don't have any feelings. They may not be able to express themselves, but they have feelings. When people say something negative or something bad to them, they know it, they can't express it. They have their own way of expressing.
Largely, as a blind person growing up in the Arab Muslim community, I felt excluded. I felt like my needs weren't met, and I needed to do my best to act like a sighted person. For example, when I had asked for a Braille Quran, I was told that was too expensive. If I could find an organization who was willing to donate it, then great, but otherwise there was just no way. Reading material, things like that. I never had access to those kinds of things, and I was told things like, well, you can try to read print, and if you can't read print, then just don't worry about it. You're Muslim, and God will grant you hasanat for the fact that you're blind and it'll be okay. So I didn't really have the opportunity to promote my own internal level of faith through access to materials, access to the Quran, access to hadith in a format that I could really utilize, and it was just expected that I would be okay with that. A friend of mine is in a wheelchair, and every Friday when she'd go to Jummah prayer, there would be a group of men who would show up and they would lift her wheelchair up and carry it down the stairs. And this happened for years and years until it occurred to somebody that maybe it wouldn't be cost prohibitive to actually install a ramp or a wheelchair lift. And they did after a while, but what seems like it would be common sense for a lot of other communities that are more established here in the United States in terms of accommodations and resources and even ADA compliance, it doesn't happen that way often with the Muslim community.
The most important thing we need are interpreters. That's number one. Without interpreters, how can we communicate? If a family knows sign language, then that's fine. Without communication, a deaf person goes to the masjid. How can he or she be emotionally touched? How can he or she be inspired? There's no connection. Everyone else socializes, but the deaf person just shows up and leaves. We need, number one, interpreters. How can deaf people learn? How will they learn Islam? Deaf people can learn, but if they're neglected, they will lag behind everyone else. That's just a negative, like having no interpreters in the masjid. Here in DC, deaf people don't really have a choice if they want to go to masjid to pray. There's only one place around here that provides an interpreter, and that's in Virginia. And it's always at the same time. 12:15, I think. Some deaf people can make it, but others can't because it conflicts with their school and work schedules. Maryland people can't really attend since it takes an hour to drive all the way to Virginia. It's different for hearing Muslims, since they can just pick out the nearest masjid and pray. That's not an option for the deaf. We have to travel a long way just to go to this one masjid, and that's negative. I need the community to grow and give support in providing interpreters in masjids for deaf people in all 3 states, Maryland, Virginia, and DC, and in all states in America and the rest of the world.
We're not disabled unless society makes us disabled. If society limits accessibility, then we're disabled. If that barrier is broken and interpreters are provided, then we won't be limited at all. We'll become fully involved members of society. It's simple, really. Provide interpreters, provide services, and we'll be involved. It's really up to society. We can't force it to happen. The gate needs to be opened.